Omar, I left a surprise for you in the fridge.
I'm not falling for that. Today we're going to talk about women in refrigerators and if the movement had any impact in comics.
I think it did.
Alright guys, women in refrigerators. I kind of know how that started, but how exactly did that trope start?
So, using women in comics as kind of disposable plot points didn't start with Green Lantern, but that's where women in refrigerators comes from. During the Kyle Rayner run, Green Lantern number 54, some throwaway villain
Major Force
killed Kyle Rayner's girlfriend.
Left a lovely
And
little note.
stuffed her in a
Stuff in a refrigerator. Yes. I didn't know what comic it was, but I know that's what it actually came from. Something that actually came from.
And, I mean, I read that when it came out. This is when I was huge into Green Lantern. And, I mean, even then I was like, what the ever-loving fuck? This is ridiculous. I mean, it's not just like, it's not horrifying from a plot standpoint. This is ridiculous from a what the hell is wrong with the comics industry standpoint.
Can we do better than this? Sure.
Yeah, but it's been a long time going. And Omar, you want to jump into that?
The whole movement started in 1999, but as Dan suggested, like, this has been going on for a long time. So this lady named Gail Simone, and we'll get to her in a few minutes, started a website with a couple friends and started pretty much tracking down each time a female was either maimed or died or raped in a comic book in order to propel the male hero, forward.
Yep.
Right?
I think I've been to that website. Yes. I have
So there was a website. It was called Women in Refrigerators, started in 1999. And I mean, this goes back to the days of Gwen Stacy. For example, Gwen Stacy, you could say, was the very first woman that died in a horrific way. This was huge. You never saw this in comic books back then. This was a character that had been around for over 100 issues. And the cover was, one of these characters will die. And so Spider-Man is fighting the Green Goblin, and the Green Goblin throws Gwen Stacy off a bridge. Spider-Man catches her. Too late. He throws his web, catches her, her neck snaps.
Yep.
Now, it's an interesting way of dying because he sits there and he's like, he couldn't save her because he feels like he killed her. It's not the villain that killed her. It was the snapping of the neck. Right? He could have thrown a web down there and caught her in a giant web. But instead, he tried to catch her, and catching her, he broke her neck. So in a way, he feels responsible for her death more than the Green Goblin. And then they kept going with things like this, like Karen Page, one of Daredevil's girlfriends, ended up dying at the hands of Bullseye. But long before Karen Page came around, there was Elektra. Elektra was a character created by Frank Miller. She was around for about 30 or so issues, and then she also met her demise at the hands of Bullseye.
Didn't she come back, though?
Yeah, she does. Well, and we'll get to that in a few minutes.
So
things like that, that's what Gail Simone did, was take note. The biggest one that kind of bothered her the most, I would say, even though it's not named after this, is from The Killing Joke. So in The Killing Joke, the Joker's trying to prove that any bad day can make anyone go mad. So what he does is he shows up at Commissioner Gordon's daughter's apartment. Barbara Gordon, as we all know, Barbara Gordon was Batgirl. He shoots her, and then he does things with her and takes pictures to show her dad to make him snap. This, of course, makes Batgirl no longer be able to be Batgirl, and later on she takes the codename Oracle, where she's in a wheelchair, but she does a lot of things behind the scenes. And actually, to me, I loved Oracle, but that's my personal opinion. I think she was one of the greatest characters in comic books, and shows that you don't have to have working limbs to be a superhero. So, again, this continued. Like, Betty Ross died in Hulk. There was also Supergirl. Characters that were dead. So, like, the things that happened to Captain Marvel, and which we'll get to my point here in a minute. Like, Captain Marvel was raped, lost her powers to Rogue, went crazy, she became binary, lost the title. When some of these women were dying, it was kind of sexualized. Not all the time, just sometimes, like in the case of The Killing Joke, where he raped her and took pictures of her.
I watched this and I was a little traumatized after watching. It's like,
Yeah, I was traumatized when
like,
Batgirl and Batman had sex.
Yeah.
That was stupid. And this wasn't only happening, of course, in the comic books. This was also happening in the movies. Like, Superman and Lois Lane gets crushed and dies. And he goes crazy and spins the earth because that is possible, scientifically speaking. I was just so used to it happening in comic books where pretty much if you were a loved one of a superhero, you weren't safe. Yeah. Like, whether you were a woman or a man, that never really hit me. I think the one time that I noticed it was really
geared towards women
weird was with Batgirl. Like, he really went all out and wanted to destroy Commissioner Gordon by using his daughter and, showing him pictures of his men raping her and things like that.
When like a son or a father dies, it's like, oh, they were shot. That's horrible.
Right,
That's
like
bad.
Punisher. Punisher's family got mowed down by a bunch of bullets.
Or even Batman's
parents, right? Kal-El's planet blew up.
Like, oh, that's bad. It's true, but when it's a woman, like especially a girlfriend or like in The Killing Joke, it's very traumatic. It's very gruesome and grotesque, and they almost push it more so. It's not just this is what happened and it's really, really sad, but let's see how far we can go with it. It's to the extreme.
Well, and specifically with the Green Lantern story, it was
unnecessary.
A throwaway.
Right.
I mean, 10 issues later, nobody even remembers that character's name.
Right.
Alexa DeWitt?
Except for Omar, yes.
It's not, but it's not like a huge plot point in Kyle Rayner's development as Green Lantern.
Right, it wasn't.
It's just, I'm real mad now because of what you did.
They use it as a staging device.
Yeah.
So it's not something that carries the character or is very pivotal all the time for that character's development. It's a staging device to propel him to the next thing that he's going to do.
Right.
And that's the problem with a lot of this.
Well, hold on. Because I don't think it's a thing anymore. Like, that's my whole, thing with this episode. Like, I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about where it came from. And I think because of Gail Simone, and then back to Gail Simone, she became a comic book writer. Mm-hmm. She went on to actually write Birds of Prey, which featured Oracle, who was Batgirl one time. She went on to do the New 52, where Barbara Gordon became Batgirl again, because they revamped the universe, so she got her legs back. So she was a voice in comics, and she was a strong voice. Like, she wrote Deadpool, and I think because of that, a lot of things change in the industry. Like, there was a lot of backlash from her website. Like, a lot of the creators, Ron Mars being one of them, Fabian Nicieza, like, they didn't know how to approach her. They were like, some of them were very...
They went on the attack.
Negative, like, How dare you attack me in my story? That's a story I told, and it made sense for the character. Whether it was a man or a woman, it's not my fault that 90% of superheroes are men, and only 10% of them are women, right? Which actually, mathematically, it makes sense. Yeah. The whole movement, by the way, was women are not going to read your comic books. If you keep writing like this, like, we're not talking about independent comic books. We're talking about superhero, DC, and Marvel comic books. Women do not want to read this stuff. That was her whole point of this movement. If you want women to read your comic books, then, quit doing things like this. Like, quit killing off side characters, or quit depowering all your women. So there was also a movement at this time that she noticed. It was called Dead Man Defrosting. At this time, Superman had died, Batman had his back broken, Aquaman had his hand gnawed off.
But they all came back.
But they came back, and they almost came back better.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Like, Aquaman, that was the first time Aquaman was a bad motherfucker. Like, when he had a damn hook on his hand, I mean, Superman came back from the dead, and he was better. Batman broke his back, but he's like, I'll do a couple sit-ups and, get better.
I don't think she was simply like saying, hey, women aren't going to read this. I think she was also saying, hey, women do read this, but you're going to lose us because we are tired of seeing this. We're tired of seeing this trope in this medium that we enjoy, and we don't want to see this anymore. It was kind of that outcry, because I know for me reading comics at a young age, I saw that. I noticed it in comics that women were being used as this trope, as this springboard, and then they're thrown away.
Now, Gail Simone has become one of my favorite writers of all time. So I'm glad that she started this, because I don't think if she hadn't... I mean, she was writing a column too in a couple of other websites, but I don't think if she had had a voice during this time, she would not be maybe where she is now. And now, since then, like, she's become friends with Ron Mars and Fabian Nicieza, like, everybody gets along. And I think that was my whole point. I don't think
Attitudes
like,
are definitely changing.
Since then, we have Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers is back being Captain Marvel. Batgirl, as I mentioned, Barbara Gordon's back being Barbara Gordon Batgirl. Elektra is back.
Yeah, I thought so.
I think people are just a little bit more thoughtful. And you have editors.
Thoughtful.
You have editors who are more thoughtful.
When
and you
Thor
have
was a woman,
more
it's
diverse, like writers, creators now than you did before. It was hard for a woman to break through into the industry,
Right,
or
I
even
think
a person of color.
But it's still
It's
hard
still
for
a
women
man-
in
It's
comics.
still
Like
it's
it's
still
mainly
hard.
it's always been a men-driven industry.
But-
Like there are a few women that are artists and writers. A lot of them stay with the independent comic books. But as far as like Marvel and DC, I remember Gail Simone saying like the Marvel comics was nothing but like a big frat house.
Yeah, it's
And it
hard,
was hard to
really
get
break
in there.
through.
Now she's back. She's back writing at Marvel Comics. So
Right.
I mean, now we have the exact opposite where Thor, Odin's son, lost his arm, and now it's Jane Foster who has cancer and holds the hammer. So every time she holds the hammer, she becomes Thor and loses the cancer. Like the cancer is gone. Now she is dying, but I'm saying that no, it's almost like backwards. That Thor has been maimed, Odin's son has been maimed, and we have the female lead now becoming the main character. So, like I said, I think it's not a slow movement. I think we've come miles ahead of where we were.
It started out very, very slow. This is
Well, I think the internet has helped
decades.
out. And this isn't like to say, this isn't a social justice warrior issue. I think it's just good storytelling shouldn't just
Hinge.
just be about killing side characters. Because to me, that's always been poor storytelling. Like anytime you kill off even a main character, that's just poor storytelling to me. Like I want to know more about the characters, and I love knowing more about the side characters. So it made comic books so much fun, like the X-Men comic books.
The thing that is weird for me to think about, I mean, this Green Lantern story was more than 20 years ago at this point. And we like to think that at least comics are a little bit more enlightened, a little more educated now, but I can't imagine either of my kids reading these stories, and stuff like that makes me a little apprehensive to get them into comics at all.
True. As an adult, when I was reading and watching The Killing Joke, I was, as an adult, legitimately traumatized. Like, I felt really weird and awkward reading. It was a good book, but it was very... It made me feel weird. I didn't like it. I didn't do it.
And I'm on the other side of the fence. I don't see, like, anything that would keep me from reading these stories. Because I think it's just part of the story to me. Whether it's like, I get it, but to me it never bothered me as a kid. Like I said, the only time I remember even being a little bit,
Traumatized?
was during this. But to me, the more evil and twisted and fucked up a villain is, the more I appreciate the hero. So I get the mentality behind some of these stories. Whether you guys agree with me or not, I see where you're coming from, but I really wouldn't have a problem with my daughters reading any of this when they get older.
Growing up with stuff like this, it didn't speak to me, and I didn't have any connection to it. But the thing is, that was 20, 25, 30 years ago, and you do have that window of change. There is more visibility that we need to make this more diverse. We need more women in the industry breaking through and giving a voice on saying, hey, we're going to change this. Even the guys, all of us, we're going to change this going forward, and we're going to make a villain do drastic and terrible things, but we're not going to use it or use a woman as a trope. A lot has changed in 20 and 30 years in the comic industry. Do you think fridging is still an issue we face today? Please comment down below. Let us know what your thoughts are.
So for the intro, we're going to have Tina in a fridge, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Please put Tina in the fridge! I have one in the car!
Or how about me going, guys, you are not putting me in
Oh,
the
I was thinking for, like, during the whole, like, monologue, we're going to shoot a fridge where she's talking from.